I would like to thank the organisers of this already 7th conference for the invitation to be here today. Particularly, I would like to extend my really warm thanks to the president of HANFA, Anton Schickmann, for having me here and inviting me. Last year, the EU and Croatia celebrated 2 major achievements. It was 10 years since Croatia's accession to the European Union, and Croatia also became the 20th member of the euro area. When honouring these achievements, Croatia's hard work and unwavering commitment to strengthen its role within the European family has been consistently mentioned. The tangible benefits that closer European integration has brought to Croatia, as measured by various economic indicators that were also cited earlier, really have to be highlighted. These features, hard work, unwavering commitment, and ultimately tangible benefits, are paradigms of how our union was built over the years and how it will need to develop further in the future. As Robert Schuman indicated in his landmark declaration in 1950, Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first create a de facto solidarity. It is also striking to see how the words of another pioneer in the EU, Simone Veil, upon her first speech in the European Parliament, resonated with today's challenges. Member states are faced with 3 great challenges.
She said, the challenge of peace, the challenge of freedom, and the challenge of prosperity. And it seems clear that we can only meet these through the European dimension. And I think that is actually more true today than it has ever been. Applying these words of such famous Europeans to our world of financial services, I believe it is important to say that European capital markets play a key role in promoting prosperity and resilience of the European financial system and the European economy at large. It is therefore timely to consider, to use Robert Schumann's words, what concrete achievements can help to create stronger integration of our capital markets. This strengthening of the EU markets is necessary to channel investments into initiatives that can deliver on the much-needed innovation, growth, and sustainability of our economy. In my remarks today, I will briefly recall some of the main challenges that capital markets currently face. I will discuss how a truly European savings and investment union should build on proportionate rules and more effective supervisory architecture. And I will finally touch upon how good corporate governance, obviously the core topic of today's conference, is key to strengthening our markets. In the past years, gradual progress has been made to improve the efficiency, scale, and resilience of European capital markets. We had some key initiatives over the large legislative period, such as building the European single access point or establishing consolidated tapes. All of that is still in the implementation process, but I'm convinced it will positively contribute to the EU capital markets. Nevertheless, the EU capital markets have remained underdeveloped when we compare it to other parts of the world, and particularly to the US. For example, in the EU 27, we've seen the share of global equity market capitalization decrease since 2015. At the end of 2023, this share stood at 11% compared to the 45% of the US markets. And that is compared to in 2009, 16, and 34 respectively. So you can see how that has basically gone against the European Union. Despite the higher number of trading infrastructures, trading activity in the EEA remains lower than in comparison to the US, partly because of the fragmentation that we still see in the European markets. And when EU markets lose attractiveness, our listed companies lose ground compared to companies listed on other markets. What we have also observed is that fragmented markets trigger further fragmentation in the application of the EU rulebook and put pressure on convergent supervision. In fact, if we are able to reduce the fragmentation of our markets and their regulation and supervision, we can also simplify the life of market participants and facilitate the compliance efforts that you all face. We should reflect on the reasons underlying such fragmentation and reduce it where we can, as market players and investors would certainly be better served if more cohesiveness and efficiency is achieved in the European Union. Several reasons may explain the challenge we face in the EU to reverse this trend. Amongst those, there is certainly the fact that the high-level political commitment that triggered the Capital Markets Union initiative in 2014 has not fully translated into meaningful progress on the ground. It is also due to the fact that when it comes to prerogatives of individual jurisdictions, quickly they re-emerge in many of the technical discussions. And then we also had some geopolitical distractions. And that, however, has only led to an increase in the urgency to close the innovation gap vis-à-vis other jurisdictions. And the need to fund a sustainable and just transition have rightly and reigniting also the move to a united and stronger capital market in Europe. We have to learn from what held us back in the past, and we need to look forward with confidence and determination towards planning concrete steps that can help create a genuine European savings and investment union. In this spirit, earlier this year, we at ESMA outlined certain recommendations to build more effective and attractive capital markets in the EU. We've identified 3 main axes of action: broadening investment opportunities for EU citizens, boosting the financing for European companies, and improving regulatory agility and supervisory consistency, as well as global competitiveness. For each of these axes, we propose specific actions to build a successful capital markets or savings and investment union with more effective supervisory architecture that fully reflects the principle of proportionality. The EU regulatory and supervisory framework is essential to make sure that the competition in our markets is fair for all market participants. Fair regulation and supervision help prevent fraudulent activities, ensure market integration and efficiency, and are a bedrock to protecting investors. As ESMA, we are ready to further support the EU institutions to make this framework even more agile, consistent, and efficient. In particular, it is necessary to continue to build more proportionality into EU policies and rules that apply to market participants all over the EU, many of which are small or in their growth phase. ESMA's mandate reserves particular attention to the issue of proportionality. When proposing new or amending rules, we give due consideration to the scale, complexity, and risks that market participants, which will ultimately be affected by these requirements, actually face. At the same time, we need to continuously balance these considerations to ensure that limiting regulatory requirements for certain players does not negatively affect investor protection and financial stability. Building more proportionality into our framework, however, should not mean dismantling from one day to the next all the regulations. It rather means taking, particularly in new rules, a very measured approach to their implementation. And let's just take the sustainability reporting example, which is very much discussed at the moment. It is very challenging for companies to implement. We are also convinced, though, that having a common EU regime is necessary to enable channeling investments into assets and companies that can effectively support the sustainability transition. We should let market practice develop upon this first application that is currently happening. Of course, we will need to closely monitor how this is actually working, And as supervisors, you would expect us to also go after really obvious infringements. But at the same time, we need to be conscious this is a huge effort. And so we also need to learn from the experience of implementation and make sure that we continue to fine-tune and change where necessary, that we also support the markets in the implementation. And I know Hanfa here and we at ESMA certainly stand ready to do that. Setting proportionate rules, thereby promoting the competitiveness of our markets, also means that our rules remain as aligned as possible internationally. So we need to also continue monitoring international developments in areas such as sustainability. Let me now move on to how we can build a more effective supervisory architecture, leveraging on the experience and knowledge of local markets and authorities. In the recent Draghi and Letta reports, as well as in ESMA's recommendations, there's a clear message to carefully consider how the EU supervisory architecture can become more efficient and effective. Here, I believe that the principle of subsidiarity should guide our considerations on how to improve the status quo. We should also be clear that EU-level supervision cannot and certainly will not by itself build a savings and investment union. Over the years, ESMA has built experience and expertise as a capital market supervisor. And our mandates have expanded from credit rating agencies to, for instance, certain benchmarks, data providers, and non-EU CCPs. Extending the population of ESMA's supervised entities should carefully be considered, assessing whether such an extension brings efficiency gains, reduces regulatory arbitrage, and facilitates the creation of a pan-European market. With this in mind, in our view, any consideration of EU-level supervision would be more suited to really significant market entities that operate across the EU member states. Pan-European market infrastructure, such, for example, in the post-trade area, due to their really EU-wide reach and significance, when they are systemically important, may be typical examples of operators that could benefit from EU-level supervision. This could also help to ensure fair and open access from anywhere in the EU to these essential market infrastructures. But close scrutiny and supervision at national level will remain, and I'm absolutely convinced about that, the foundation of the EU's supervisory framework. The EU system of financial supervision is the foundation of the strength of the national supervisors. It's built on that, and that will remain to be the case. National supervision is best placed when it comes to players that operate mainly locally. Due to their proximity to local markets and their understanding, they can best support smaller companies aiming to grow through accessing the EU capital markets and engage in initiatives for the benefit of local retail investors. I strongly believe that we are most effective and efficient in supervising the European market when national supervisors cooperate closely with each other, and ESMA will continue to play its role to drive supervisory convergence, identifying cross-EU risks, and encourage an active exchange of information and learning from each other. In thinking about a more effective supervisory architecture, we should not fall into the trap that we've confronted with in the past. There's certainly no contradiction between building a more integrated European capital market, but also the role of strengthening local financial markets. Indeed, the two need to come together. Firstly, building pan-European markets is especially beneficial for smaller jurisdictions that aim to support the growth of local companies. Building deeper and more integrated capital markets at EU level or at regional level will broaden the funding and growth opportunities for these companies. As the Draghi report highlighted, European companies often fail to successfully pass the growth stage, with many European startups relocating to other jurisdictions, mostly in the US, rather than benefiting from European capital markets that allow them to scale and grow. Secondly, in a pan-European market, local infrastructures and market institutions will function as essential gateways to the single market. Local infrastructure will be, in fact, key for comprehensive and efficient access to the single market for all market players. existing regulatory and supervisory mechanisms enabling this combination of local and EU-wide markets are only partially effective today. For example, the passporting regime for EU issuers has functioned quite well in theory, but it's used in a very limited way so far. In 2022, only around a third of the prospectuses approved in one member state were passported to another member state. Furthermore, our analysis shows that regulated markets still typically are domestic, while it is more the multilateral trading facilities that actually provide the stronger cross-border trading. We therefore need to look at how can we promote more interoperability and collaboration between national markets in a way that cultivate the collective power of these markets operating in a more unified and seamless way. Thirdly, the scale of change that will be needed to gradually improve competitiveness and attractiveness of our capital markets requires strong cooperation between the ESMA and the national authorities to work collectively to make sure that all of this is supervised in a coherent way. Before I conclude, let me just spend a few words on the very important topic of today's conference, corporate governance. Making capital markets stronger and more united also means building a culture of confidence in those markets. And Ante mentioned it earlier, the two things go together. This is why the ongoing work that ESMA and national authorities like HANFA are doing to promote sound corporate governance in listed companies is key to strengthening our markets. Good corporate governance not only enables sound decision-making within companies, but also promotes external accountability towards investors and stakeholders. Topics such as the independence of supervisory board members and audit committee members, dealing with the emergence of conflicts of interest and the protection of whistleblowers are basic safeguards of good governance, which should be regularly assessed at national level. The oversight of the board of directors on matters relating to sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, and all other aspects are critical. The annual monitoring work that HANFA undertakes on the corporate governance practices of listed companies in Croatia is therefore essential to help those practices continue to evolve in the right direction. In particular, I would like to commend my HANFA colleagues for producing their 2023 annual corporate governance report, which I know will be presented shortly. From ESMA's perspective, we undertake work in the corporate governance space on different fronts. Certainly, we've recently undertaken an assessment of the implementation of the revised Shareholder Rights Directive, where we provided a report to the European Commission in July 2023. And we are now waiting to see what they will do with the recommendations that we've made. Another area that features prominently on people's mind is the corporate governance in the corporate governance world is the development that we've also followed closely as part of the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, CSDDD. There are certain items in the CSDDD that are related to good corporate governance. For example, companies' obligation to engage meaningfully with stakeholders or their obligation to prepare transition plans for climate change mitigation. While the CSDDD will depend on its national transposition and also the appointment of the national authorities, ESMA will clearly be interested in the consistent application and the interrelation with the existing transparency obligation of listed companies. There's also the third area, the Directive of Multiple Vote Share Structures, which is part of the Listing Act. This is coming into force very soon. And I could go on for quite a while, but I'm conscious of time, so I would just finally also want to mention the Directive of Improving Gender Balance, which goes to the point Ante mentioned earlier of having truly diverse boards that can take decisions in the most informed and well-diversified way. Finally, let me conclude. As the history of our union shows, it is through concrete achievements that, step by step, we have built our common institutions and created a safe space for European citizens and businesses to flourish. Recent geopolitical developments, the increasing dependency of our society on data and innovation, alongside the challenges posed by the sustainability transition, are changing the way in which our economic and financial system works. Our capital markets need to keep pace with these developments, and over the years, we've lost competitiveness vis-à-vis other international financial hubs. Therefore, it is time to take our commitment from creating a strong, effective, and attractive capital market to the next level. As ESMA, we are ready to contribute to this undertaking in close cooperation with all the European securities markets regulators, including HANFA. To succeed, we will need to proceed with more determination, pragmatism, and cohesion, and we need to do so urgently. Inspired by the type of unwavering commitment and hard work that has made Croatia integral to the EU family, I'm confident that we can learn from you and together develop our EU capital markets in a form to achieve a successful savings and investment union. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good rest of the conference.